Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, June the 10th, 2025. Today I thought we would talk about Greta Thunberg. So Greta Thunberg, she was on this boat and she wanted to go to Gaza to deliver some aid, and her boat got intercepted by the Israelis, and I think she's now in Israel, and then she's going to get deported. And so with Greta, I don't have a time of birth for her. I do have a date of birth. I thought I would look at her horoscope and see what's going on in her life. But before I talk about Greta, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, June the 10th. So here is the chart for today. Actually, I don't think that is the chart for today. I think that is the chart of Greta and her connection with Israel, but that is something I will be talking about later. So here is the chart for today, set for noon New York time. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So here is the position of the planets for noon New York today, Tuesday, and the moon is in Sagittarius, 12 degrees Sagittarius. So doesn't matter where you are in the world. The moon is in Sagittarius, and it's applying to an opposition with the sun. In other words, we've got the run up to a full moon. That full moon is tomorrow. It might be late this evening if you're in California, or if you're in Hawaii or Alaska. I think that's right. So that full moon, if you're in California, it would be just before midnight this evening, and earlier if you're in Hawaii or Alaska. But really, we should regard the full moon as being tomorrow, Wednesday. And in my video for Wednesday, I'll be considering this full moon. But still, we can think about this full moon today, and we are probably aware of its growing influence. The moon is still waxing, but something is reaching its culmination. We can see it in the sky if it's not too cloudy. You can see it's quite bright moon, and so we may be starting to realize something with this Sagittarius full moon. It's a full moon that is going to affect some people more than others. I think it could very well have an impact on Donald Trump, because remember, Donald Trump has a full moon, moon in Sagittarius, sun in Gemini. Something may occur to him. I think very soon I'll be talking about Donald Trump's chart in detail. I'll probably wait until his birthday though. So with the moon in Sagittarius, opposition the sun, or starting to make that opposition to the sun, we need to look at what is happening and how we are responding to what is happening. And perhaps certain things are becoming clear. They weren't clear before. There were things we started at the new moon. There was a new moon on, I think, May the 27th, and now we can see how it's really, really working out. So that is the main thing going on with the moon. In fact, there aren't any lunar aspects today of any consequence, and in fact, also there aren't many aspects in general. We had loads and loads of aspects yesterday. Yesterday, when I was doing the horoscope for Monday, I went on for longer than usual, because we had all sorts of things going on, and we had Jupiter moving into Cancer, but now we've got Mars biquintile Neptune, Mars in Leo, biquintile Neptune in Aries. So that biquintile is it's of some interest. I mean, it's not a major aspect. It might be that some of us are trying to create a particular impression, and we might even want to make a special effort to be difficult to understand. it may serve our purposes, and we may want to make a special effort to be confusing. Sometimes it can be worth doing, and we want to be in a situation where people look at our actions and they don't know why we're doing it. We want to keep people guessing. So that might be how the Mars biquintile Neptune works. Additionally, we have a quincunx between Mercury and Pluto. So Mercury is around 3 degrees Cancer and Pluto is at 3 degrees Aquarius. So Mercury is the way we think, the way we try to understand things, sometimes also, of course, the way we try to talk and express ourselves, and Pluto is in the way. Pluto's creating a problem. Pluto might represent something that is a bit difficult to understand, or something we don't want to deal with, but we can't ignore it. And so, what is this small thing represented by Pluto that's potentially messing up with the way we think and communicate? Is it something we should be ignoring? Is it a problem? But really, with the quincunx, it's something we should be integrating. It's something useful. It's something that is there for us to utilize, and we just have to find the right way of employing it. And so, don't be afraid of anything. Okay, there are some things you have to be afraid of, but if something is complicated, it doesn't mean it's useless. You might have to do some research. You might have to think about it, and you might have to ask yourself, what is the right approach? And don't skim over the surface too much with that Mercury quincunx, Pluto. So that's a broad picture set for New York. If you go, we look at the chart for Sydney, Australia, noon, Sydney, Australia, as a representative of Australasia. Moon is still in Sagittarius. Okay, the moon might be in Scorpio, very early in the morning, and like in the middle of the night. But it's really a moon in Sagittarius day, and really, there's not a great deal of difference between the experience of being in the US and the experience of being in Australia or New Zealand, all things being equal. The moon, though, is making a trine to Saturn and a trine to Neptune. If you're in the US, you might not really pick up on that trine to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, unless you're up early. Even then, you'll probably miss it, or at least miss the major impact of it. But Moon trine Saturn, Moon trine Neptune, they're a fairly gentle influence, and so if you are in Australasia, you may have a chance to be able to sort of get yourself together and organize yourself. Moon in Sagittarius, you have ideas, there are things you want to do, but trine Saturn, then you can find ways of structuring it. And so let's now move to the heliocentric picture, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. And like yesterday, Mars is opposition Neptune. I mean, it's not exactly opposition Neptune, but it's pretty close to being exactly opposition Neptune. And Mars is applying to a square of Jupiter. So some of us might have to be careful how we use our energy, where we use our energy, what we put our energy into, because there is a possibility of getting obsessed about the wrong things, deciding that something is important and it's not important, or we might get distracted. And it might not just be us that gets distracted. It might be the world that's getting distracted. People are missing the important things and just focusing on something else, and it doesn't really work out very well. So that's something we might want to be, we might want to watch out for. And it could be with Jupiter, on the T. I mean, over the next few days, as this T square becomes exact, it could be that the solution is to rise above the problem, to be able to ask ourselves, Jupiter, what is the right approach, what is the moral approach. And it could be that, something that seems to be going nowhere could be turned into something that really is important and is worth going for. But with Jupiter, one does have to be careful. And Mars square Jupiter, it just could be about using one's energy in the wrong way. And as individuals, perhaps there's a limit to the amount of damage we can cause. But if you're a government, then you can obviously cause a great deal of damage. And I don't think there's a great deal else to say. And so I now want to look at things from a viewpoint of the 12 signs. Now, with the 12 signs, there really aren't many exact aspects today. And the two exact aspects we've got today, Mars biquintile Neptune, Mercury quintile Pluto, they are fairly minor aspects. And having gone on and on with the 12 signs for yesterday, I'm really hoping I'm going to be able to keep it brief. So let's see how brief I can be. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, June the 10th, 2025. Aries. Aries, there isn't a great deal of pressure on you, I don't think, at the moment. You can largely do what you want without much interference. So if there's something you want to explore, Aries, then go for it. You don't have to explain what you're doing. You don't have to apologize, but you don't have to be overly assertive. Nothing has to be fought for. You don't have to ask anyone's permission in most cases. So do what you feel you want to do. And okay, it may be that towards the end of the day things do become a bit more complicated because the moon is starting to become full. So right at the end of the day and into Wednesday, we do have a final run up to the full moon, and that full moon might reveal to you certain facts that you could have been ignoring, or maybe you just didn't have access to them, and you may have been acting on the basis of incomplete information, and you can only do so much, and what you've done so far has been fine. But when you actually see what's happening, when you see what's going on, and you start to get the information, you might have to adjust your strategy. Now, also, Aries, if you want something to happen today, and if you feel that things are slow, you're certainly able to up the pace if you want to. You can, turn up the volume and be quite dramatic. But if you want to be dramatic, you really have to understand what kind of day it is. It is not a day when there is a huge amount going on. And so, there's some danger that you're just dramatic for the sake of it, and it's all rather meaningless. Or you feel that you have to make a lot of noise when it was never necessary to make a lot of noise because you could have got your way anyway. So don't feel, Aries, that you need to push it, because in most cases, I don't think you do. And really, it's quite possibly as simple as that. Now, there is a biquintile between Mars and Neptune today, and of course, Mars is your ruler. And this biquintile, it's an 144 degree aspect. So 144 degrees is 2/5 of a circle, and it is about the kind of style you might want to create. And for you, this biquintile Neptune could be about creating a style which is quite difficult to pin down. It's almost, almost sort of ethereal. There is a nebulousness to it, and that's something you can create. And it might actually be about hiding your not hiding your feelings, but hiding your intentions. So, people really don't know what you're doing. And maybe that's a good place to be. Do you want your motivations to be out in the open? Do you want people to know your next move? Well, I don't think you do. So if you want to be secretive, then I think you can be secretive and you can be very effective about it. But you don't want to take things too far. There's a danger that you're tempted to tell a few lies. And Aries is a very honest sign. It's probably the most honest of the 12 signs. You could say it's Sagittarius, but it might be Aries. Aries is the first sign of the 12, and so getting yourself caught up in lies and half-truths is not a good idea. But you might be tempted to. You might feel that that's the right approach, but I don't think it is the right approach. But at the same time, if you don't say anything, you can't be accused of lying, can you? You just don't say what you're doing. And if you want to be secretive, I think that the Mars biquintile Neptune should actually help you. Taurus, Venus, of course, is still moving through your sign. So it's just started moving through your sign, and so as the week progresses, you're able to take control of things. And today, for most of the 12 signs, I don't think is going to be an especially active or busy time. And so that resonates with Venus in Taurus. You have a chance, Taurus, to just do what you want to do in your own way and at your own pace. That can be very important for Taurus. Taurus, in some respects, is quite a slow sign, one step at a time. And with Venus in Taurus, that really does resonate. And also it can take you time to understand what is going on, and that understanding could take place on an emotional level. You're trying to understand what people are feeling, and what the general atmosphere is like, and give yourself a chance to let it all sink in. And in most cases, I really don't think that there is anything you have to do. In fact, too much action, the wrong kinds of action, could actually be counterproductive. I mean, some Taurians, may be tempted to go in a direction that you hadn't been planning on. It seems tempting, but deep down, it's the wrong direction. But you can't actually articulate why it's the wrong direction. But you go down this direction, and you eventually realize that at best it's going nowhere. At worst, you could have got yourself into you could be getting yourself into a situation that may be actually very difficult to get out of. And so, Taurus, I would be inclined today to stick to the narrow and stick to the straight and narrow, and focus on what is important. And there's not a great deal that is important in terms of anything you have to do, anything that you have to initiate. And so just enjoy the day, and don't do anything that you weren't planning on doing in the first place. It's just not a good time for taking random initiatives, because those initiatives, just in the end, they just might not work out. Gemini, the main aspect today is probably a quincunx between Mercury and Pluto. And this Mercury-Pluto quincunx might sound a bit obscure, but I think it could matter. And so Mercury is you, and Pluto is something you're trying to take on board, and something you're trying to take on board that you don't fully understand. Maybe you don't even want to understand. And so what does that Pluto represent? It could be an idea. an idea that is just waiting for you to discover, and it may be challenging. You've got your beliefs. Okay, you may have a certain amount of flexibility being a Gemini, but still you think you've sorted a great deal out, and you know what's true, you know what's not, and then Pluto represents something else. You just hadn't taken it into account. So if you do find yourself making decisions, then you might feel ever so slightly uncomfortable, as if logically it's the right thing to do, but something's not right. And if you do feel that way, then don't go any further. It just could be something new that you need to integrate. And if you don't integrate, you might get away with it in the short term, but in the long term, you won't. It will trip you up. So just realize how complex things are, and it just may be that there's something else you have to consider, which could change everything. And don't be too sure of yourself. And additionally, other people do matter. Moon is in Sagittarius, but just because other people matter, just because you take other people into account, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to take them too seriously. Some people could be a distraction, or they could encourage you to do things which in the end don't work out. In fact, some people could just be a plain sort of bad influence on you. And when you look at what other people are doing and what other people are saying, then actually you might disapprove. And disapproval is not such a bad response. It's not a response you have to articulate. You have to sort of tell people that you disapprove of their actions. But you see someone doing something, saying something, and you just feel that that's wrong. And you disapprove, and you find yourself judging. And again, today, I don't think that's a problem. And if you do have a moral reaction to something, then I think that reaction is absolutely right. And yeah, Geminis can be moral. I know that they have some reputation for being amoral, just going where the wind blows when it comes to moral matters. But I think actually at the moment you do have a sense of right and wrong. And you know that some things are wrong, and yeah, this can be reflected in some of the people you come across. Some people you just regard as not being ethical, and if you feel that there's something about someone that is just not right, then I think it is, Gemini, a good idea to trust your feelings. Cancer, it's a day when you want to make sure that everything is done properly, and you have ideas about how things should be done, and you want things done in your own way. And I don't think there's going to be much in the way of resistance. It's just all going to be straightforward. But when there's no resistance, absolutely no resistance, you might have questions. You might be wondering, well, is that really right? You kind of expect people to say something, but sometimes they just say nothing and they let you get on with it. And if that's what you feel, then maybe you're just on the right path, but you're just not very confident about being on the right path. Now, we do have a build-up to a full moon. So, this full moon is going to be tomorrow, Wednesday. Okay, California. If you're in California, it will be very late this evening. Or if you're in Hawaii or Alaska, the same. But if you are around later and later in the day, if you are sort of thinking and feeling, it just may feel that something is happening, that something is becoming clearer. Maybe you started the day not being absolutely sure what was happening, not absolutely sure what you were supposed to do. You didn't feel that you had a great deal of this great sense of direction. But then, as the moon, as the day progresses, as the moon hurtles towards the opposition of the sun, there is clarity, and that clarity could be about what you are doing. You didn't know why you were doing something. You didn't know often what to do, and you're also thinking about the consequences of what you're doing. But this full moon is really starting to make things clearer for you, and it's a natural process. And I don't think, Cancer, that it's really anything to be concerned about, and it's all about you discovering the truth. And with every full moon comes a new look at the truth, and it allows you to progress. And tomorrow, Wednesday, you'll be able to get the full blast of that full moon. Now, on a more positive note, we now have Jupiter definitely in Cancer. So Jupiter went into Cancer yesterday, but now it's at 0 degrees 11 Cancer at noon New York time. So you're really starting to feel that, and feel, I hope, the benefits of Jupiter being in Cancer. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, and of course it's in your sign, and so that should make you lucky. And Mercury is making a conjunction to Jupiter. Now that conjunction to Jupiter is past, and Mercury is moving quickly. It's now 3 degrees away, but it's still in orb. I think Mercury and Jupiter are close enough to categorize that as a functioning conjunction. And so Cancer, if you want to, you can be very positive and enthusiastic and realistic as well. And you for sure you understand the challenges that might be coming up sort of later in the week. And don't forget that another thing, Cancer, is that Jupiter is starting to make a square to Saturn. Now, that Jupiter square Saturn is not exact until the till the end of a week, but it is an important aspect. It's absolutely not something to be understated. Now, I will be talking about the Jupiter Saturn square in detail at the end of a week, but I regard the Jupiter Saturn square as very often being connected with society, social trends, the economy, and because that Jupiter Saturn square is hitting sort of angular houses for you, Jupiter in Cancer, Saturn in Aries, Cancer, you can really start to have a real feeling for the way it's all going. And as a Cancer, you have a strong sense of self-preservation, and this square between Jupiter and Saturn can help you to preserve yourself, because it allows you to get a feeling for what's going to happen next, not necessarily in your life, but in the life of other people and the world and society around you. And of course, this is going to have an impact on you. And you just may find over the next week that you're in a position where you just know things that other people just don't get. And I do think that you can take advantage of it, but you don't necessarily have to worry about it today. But just bear in mind that this Jupiter and Saturn are getting closer and closer together. And I'll be talking about this aspect in detail later in the week. Leo, you can't do everything. I mean, you can't do whatever you want. You might want to do stuff. It might be very attractive. It might be interesting, but it could be the case, Leo, that you you put your energy into things which, strictly speaking, you shouldn't be doing. There could be temptations, and you feel that something is interesting, something is exciting, and you go for it, and it could backfire. And the concept of temptation, may be something to consider. What is tempting you? You might know that something is dangerous, but you might want to put your energy into it anyway. So, Leo, it's probably a good idea to be cautious, and also to understand that in some ways you could be your own worst enemy. You could just get involved in something, for no particular reason, or even because you're bored, and it might not work out. So, think about what is important to you. What should you be doing? Well, it is a day, Leo, when I think you can be very creative. You can do stuff that you feel sort of quietly satisfied about, but you might just think that you're not going far enough. You just want something more. And because you want something more, you could get yourself into trouble. And I think instead you should be satisfied with just small gains, and that should be enough. And because today is not naturally a very active and dynamic time, even though the moon is in Sagittarius. So just accept the way things are, and don't feel pushed, and look also at what you're doing and how it relates to other people. We have got a full moon coming up, and this full moon is probably going to be exact tomorrow, and this full moon might encourage you to ask questions about how acceptable you are in particular places. You have interests, things that are really important to you, but are they getting enough support? And it's tempting to think that if you're not getting support for what you're doing, you should just give it up. There is that temptation, and you might be feeling this, as you move into the full moon. And it's very important, Leo, that you do think for yourself. Just because something is out of fashion today doesn't mean to say it's not important. Doesn't mean you should give up on it. It just may be an important part of who you are, and you may actually be ahead of the curve. You might actually be onto something here, which is going to be very important for everyone soon enough. But just right now, it's not in style, it's out of fashion, and then you might decide to give it up because you're not getting enough support. So while it's true that you need to consider the social dimension, you also have to realize that you are an individual, you are a unique individual, and you need to value your independence, and as well as your intrinsic creativity. Virgo, today is a day which in some respects is an anticlimax. Yesterday, Monday, there was a load of stuff going on astrologically, just tons of things happening. I could have just gone on and on about it, and I did go on and on about it. My video was well over 2 hours yesterday. Today's video is going to be much shorter because there isn't a great deal going on. There aren't any exact aspects, and this may say something about the way you feel, that there isn't much happening. There's just no real point, and it's even possible that you could feel somewhat negative. I mean, Mercury is your ruler, and while it's true that Mercury is making a conjunction to Jupiter, or has made a conjunction to Jupiter, yesterday we had Mercury making squares to Saturn and Neptune, and so those squares between Saturn and Neptune are still in operation. They're not as strong as yesterday, but they're still there. And Mercury square Saturn can be about feeling sorry for oneself, or feeling that there's no point. That can be how Saturn works. What is the point in doing this? It's all a waste of time. And you might sort of judge yourself quite harshly. And you need to be aware of that. Virgo is a very honest sign, but you can be too honest. And you just might think that things are a waste of time, when they're not. And so, rather than sort of worry about what you haven't done in the past, perhaps you should be looking for something. There is something you should be looking for. There's something missing, and it connects with what you're trying to achieve, and what you're trying to work out. And we can symbolize this as Mercury being quincunx Pluto. Mercury a ruler, quincunx Pluto. And so Mercury quincunx Pluto is about you knowing that something is missing, but your first inclination is not what you don't want to find it. You don't want to look for it. And it just could be that it feels like too much work. You might literally have to look for something you've lost, something you haven't seen for weeks, and you suddenly want to get hold of it because you decide that it's important. But then, can you be bothered? It's worth being bothered. If you feel any sense of missingness, then look. And it might not be about something being physically lost. It just could be about an idea that you have, or just having to do some work that you don't want to do just to complete something. And so that does say something about your ideas and how you're trying to develop your ideas. And if you're feeling negative about yourself, it's quite possible that the reason you're feeling negative about yourself is because deep down you know that something is missing. And as I've just said, that missing thing is available, but you're going to have to put in the work. So do find it. And that perhaps is what you should be doing today. And you don't have to be out there in the world, out there in society, being noticed. You can probably do it all on your own, and you know where to look. And in fact, if you feel that something is unresolved, that something hasn't been found, that's going to make it actually quite difficult for you to function in a social setting. So if you are planning on meeting people today, first of all, make sure you find what you're looking for, or make sure you find the answers you're looking for, because then you're just going to feel a lot more relaxed. Libra, you are moving from one place to another. You may not have a great deal of purpose. I mean, right now you do actually have a lot of purpose. Looking at things from a broader view. Remember, Jupiter's just gone into Cancer. I talked about Jupiter going into Cancer yesterday. I think that Jupiter going into Cancer, is really something good, something you should welcome. And in terms of your ambitions, it's really going to help you out. But Jupiter's in Cancer for nearly 13 months. It leaves Cancer at the end of the end of June next year, 2026. But very short term, you might not have a sense of purpose, and you just might find yourself moving from one place to another, not too sure where you're going, and you may be open-minded. There's an opportunity here, there's an opportunity there, whatever. And yeah, it's nice that you're being flexible and being open-minded, but there is some possibility that you're not sufficiently aware of what you're getting into. And, on your travels, you might go down a route that is not necessarily advisable. And it could have adverse consequences. So perhaps perhaps Libra, you should be thinking about what you're doing and not being so random about things, and having some kind of a plan might be a good idea, because at the very least a plan would stop you from making mistakes, and having a serious approach is worthwhile, isn't it? Remember, Venus is in Taurus now. It's not in Aries. Venus, while Venus was in Aries, you had to consider what other people were doing, what other people were saying. But now Venus is in Taurus. It is more serious, and you need to think things through and feel things through as well. And Venus is in its own sign, and so if you take an intense approach and you're really prepared to go deeply into things and ask yourself, what could go wrong as well as what can go right, then I think that you'll be able to you will be able to make sense of things, and you will be able to make the right decisions. And just overall overall Libra, with Jupiter in Cancer and Venus in Taurus, it is a great time for you. It really is. I must emphasize this, but you don't want to spoil it by sort of today deciding on a course of action that is unplanned and you haven't thought through the consequences, and in a worst case scenario, it could really trip you up. Scorpio, if you want something to happen, it can certainly happen. No doubt about that. You are quite assertive at the moment, and if you feel that something has to be said or done, you will be able to make waves. But it's not a day that is especially dramatic. Yesterday we had all the drama. Yesterday we had loads and loads and loads of aspects, but today, not so much. And so, when there are no aspects, no exact aspects, that does give you more freedom. So actually, you can do largely what you want without having to worry about anyone getting in the way of you, and you can perhaps play with the impressions you give, because today there is a biquintile between Mars and Neptune. Mars is your ruler; it's biquintile Neptune, and so with this biquintile between Mars and Neptune, you might have an idea about how you want to come across, and it might be quite Neptunian, nebulous, not giving anything away. And so the style you adopt, clothes you wear, the impression you give, it's all about deflecting attention, because you don't want people to know who you are and what you want. And it's not just about what you wear, and it's also about what you say and just the impression you give. And so you're going to be very good at sending people off on false leads. You could, if you want, be an effective liar, but is it really necessary to tell lies? Is it morally right to tell lies? But if you feel that you want to tell lies, and if you want to hide the truth, then I think that's something you can do, but not necessarily in a spontaneous way. Sometimes you have to think very carefully if you're going to tell lies. and you have to work out why you're doing it and what the reason is. And you better have a good reason, because obviously in most cases it's not a good idea to tell lies. So don't be a liar if you don't have to be. Or maybe we're talking about white lies, or it just could be throwing people off the scent. And that Mars biquintal Neptune. Additionally, I mean, it could have a spiritual dimension. Is Neptune, and so if you feel that your life is bereft of meaning, I'm sure it's not bereft of meaning. If today is bereft of meaning, then you can make the effort to find meaning. So it could be that something that seems routine and trivial, boring, you can actually turn it into real meaning. And there could be something quite sort of zen about that, taking some everyday activity and looking at it in a new way, and it becomes part of something broader from yourself. And so perhaps you should be looking for the spiritual significance in everything you do, however trivial it might seem on the surface. Sagittarius. The Sagittarius moon, still in Sagittarius, your sign. It's not doing a great deal. Okay, we have got a full moon coming up. That full moon is going to be exact. Well, this evening, if you're in sort of California, Hawaii, Alaska, but I think that for most of us, the full moon is tomorrow. And so it's preparatory. The moon is in Sagittarius, not doing a great deal. If you want to think about it, you may know or feel that something is coming to an end. You can see that it's coming to an end, but the end is not quite there yet. And so you don't necessarily have to think about things too deeply. You can just enjoy things without any short-term pressure. And so be yourself, and don't feel that anything necessarily has to be done. I mean, if you want things to be done, you can certainly make them happen. You're arguably, of all the 12 signs, Sagittarius, you are quite possibly the strongest and the most powerful at the moment today. I mean, in a relative sense, it's not a very powerful day, but if anyone has the power, then Sagittarius, we could say that it's you. And the reason for that, relates to some of the midpoints that Jupiter is on. I mean, let me just show you. So here's a chart for today. But if we look at the 90-degree dial, let me just show you what I mean. So there's Jupiter. You can see Jupiter, 0 degrees Cancer, and it's on the 90 points, and you see Jupiter is on the Venus-Mars midpoint, and it is on the Mars-Pluto midpoint. So there is actually a Venus-Pluto aspect at the moment. I think Venus is square Pluto. So that Venus square Pluto links up with Mars, and you're able to bring it all together. And Jupiter is also conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint. So actually, Sagittarius, that does make you potentially very charismatic, and you know how to express yourself, and you know how to express yourself attractively. And also, if there's something you want, if there's something you really want, and you decide that you really have to get it, then there's a good chance you can be successful. Though maybe you shouldn't be throwing too much power into the situation, because remember, there's a full moon, and with this full moon, things might change. Now, you could say that this full moon relates back to the new moon on, when was it, May the 27th. And so something is reaching its culmination, and you feel that finally you're close to what you wanted, and actually now might be your chance to actually get it. And perhaps you'll benefit from the fact that other people are very often quite non-committal. They're not in the mood for having fights and arguments, and so because you're the one that wants things to happen, you can benefit, and there won't be much resistance. And if there's not much resistance, well, there is a moral dimension there. You don't want to be in a position where you're taking advantage of other people, but if there's something you really feel you want, you really must get it, then Sagittarius, you do have the opportunity. But again, you have to ask yourself whether it's the right thing to do, and also it's possible with a full moon coming up, but something you want today is something you're not going to want tomorrow. So if there's something you desperately want, ask yourself, is it just a whim, or is it something really serious that you really need to get in terms of your long-term development? Capricorn, it's not a day when you feel that you absolutely need to do anything. It could actually be quite a quiet day. I mean, I think for many people today is quiet, certainly quieter than yesterday, though you're certainly able to say what's on your mind if you have to. I mean, Mercury is still making a square to Saturn, and so with that square between Mercury and Saturn, you're quite good with words. That might not sound right to you, because you think, well, Mercury square Saturn doesn't sound good with words. Mercury is square Saturn, but it's about you having the impetus and the dynamism to take words and to structure them and to make them into something that other people can understand. And so if you feel that you want to be understood, then Capricorn, you absolutely can be understood. And when you look around you, there is actually a general lack of understanding. That is a problem. People don't understand things. Maybe they can't be bothered to understand things, but you understand it all, and you see where things are moving. And this is helped by the fact that Jupiter is starting to make a square to Saturn. So this Jupiter-Saturn square is exact, I think, at the end of a week, and it's important, and it affects you. Saturn in Aries is about to be squared by Jupiter in Cancer. You're already feeling it, and this may give you a feeling of knowledge. You just know. You just know how it's all going to work out, and you're not wearing any rose-tinted spectacles, not at all. You can see the bad as well as the good, and this may be weighing in on you. And you may feel that there's something you want to do, something you want to communicate, but how are you going to do it? And it's especially the case that you are perhaps plugged into the cosmos. You know how it's working, and you actually know fundamentally, Capricorn, what changes are required. Now, right now, it might seem that those changes are absolutely impossible, that they cannot be achieved. You might feel stuck. I wonder how Greta's feeling. Greta's a Capricorn. But I won't speculate about Greta for right now, because I'll be talking about Greta in detail later in this video. And so you are in a position of knowledge, and the frustrating thing could be at the moment that you're just not in a position to be able to communicate what you know, because you just know that you won't be understood. But don't give up on it. With this Mercury square Saturn, you know how to get the words out. What you say is great, And it just may be that some people might not just some people, maybe most people just won't get it. They won't understand it. They won't understand the power of your message. But you have to keep ploughing on, and this is what Capricorn does. Keep going, keep going, keep going, and in the end, it will work out. And part of it is about using the resources around you. You have a lot of resources, and actually, with Jupiter moving into Cancer, the resources have increased, even though it might not feel like it right now. And those resources, they could be human resources. Right now, people might not seem to be very helpful or cooperative, but that's a temporary situation. I think that later on, over the next few days, things will become easier for you. But it's not a difficult day. It's just a day that could be frustrating because you just know what needs to be done, you know what needs to be said, but short term, you might not feel that there's sufficient support. Aquarius, you know that something should be happening. You're not entirely satisfied with the way things are, and you would like some you'd like some action, and you'd like it if you were the one to actually create that action. And you get a tantalizing glimpse of what that action requires, but right now you might not entirely be in a position to do anything about it. And part of the problem could be the social environment. We've got to build up to a full moon. This full moon is exact. It could be late tonight, could be tomorrow, probably tomorrow if you're most parts of the world. This full moon makes you realize the limitations of your social environment. People offer a lot, but are they actually going to be able to deliver? And you're starting to be aware of this. And so if you really want to move things to the next stage, you're going to have to think of a new strategy. And this may relate to the fact that Pluto is now in Aquarius. When did it move into Aquarius? November of last year. No, I think it was November the 17th. So with Pluto in Aquarius, you're in the mood for change. You want to create change, especially as Venus is square Pluto. Venus was square Pluto yesterday, but you're still feeling that aspect, and you just feel that things could be better, and you also realize that change cannot be gradual. I think that's a big part of it. If change is going to happen, it has to be sudden and dramatic, and that arguably is in keeping with the Aquarian symbolism. Although, as you know, if you've been watching these videos for long enough, I do not believe that Uranus rules the sign Aquarius. However, I am prepared to accept that Uranus has an association with the sign Aquarius, and so Uranus is about creating change and tearing up the status quo. And we do have the growing influence of a square aspect between Mars and Uranus. That Mars and Uranus not exact right now, but it's there. Mars is at 26 Leo, Uranus is at 28, 29 Taurus. So that square is across angular houses in the Aquarian chart. So in a general sense, you feel that things aren't good enough, things do have to change. And you've actually been having this feeling for a long time, while Uranus has been moving through Taurus for the last, I don't know how many years, was it 7 years, 6 years, 7 years, something like that. So while Uranus has been moving through Taurus, there has been this growing restlessness, and that things as they are, things need to move. And and now, with Pluto moving into Aquarius, that is, especially strong. And in fact, we have this rather powerful outer planet formation coming together, and you can see it here. There is Uranus. There's Uranus. There's Pluto. There's Saturn on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. And this is real outer planet stuff. I mean, it's quite cosmic. It's quite heavy, but I think you're aware of it. You can feel it. You can almost become part of it, and it might present you with an obligation or a feeling of obligation. But yeah, that you maybe have to change something dramatically, and it's not just about you. It's about your role, and it is about wider society. I mean, I know that's all a bit pie in the sky. What about today? Well, today's fine. If you want to just enjoy yourself and not worry too much about what you're not doing and talk to your friends, yeah, you can. But if you do spend time socializing, there just maybe a feeling that it's not quite going anywhere, and certain people could be disappointing. So I'm not really saying it's going to be a bad day. I'm just saying it's a day where you're going to be very aware of what needs to be done. Pisces, it's a day when I'm not convinced that a great deal is happening, across the 12 signs. And part of the issue is that from an aspect point of view, there isn't much going on. Certainly compared with yesterday. I mean, yesterday there was just loads going on. I mean, that's why my video was so long. But today things are briefer, and you might pick up on this lack of energy, at least compared with yesterday. But that doesn't mean to say that it need be a bad day. It might even be quite a good day, certainly compared to what other people are experiencing. And actually, Pisces, in a relative sense, I think that you are strongly placed. And don't forget, Jupiter, your ruler, is in Cancer. It's exalted in Cancer. Furthermore, Jupiter is making some powerful midpoint aspects, and you can actually see this by eye. If you look, there's Venus, there's Mars, and Jupiter is on the Venus-Mars midpoint, and so that Jupiter on the Venus-Mars is going to be is going to make you attractive and charismatic, and you're going to be able to make people realize who you are and what you want. And I think that you're likely to get a sympathetic reception, and of course Jupiter's now in Cancer. So if you want to make a good impression, Pisces, you can, but it is all in a relative sense, because today is not especially dramatic, and some people are going to be not very motivated. And so if you want to motivate people, well, you might have to make a special effort. But again, maybe this is something you can do with the moon is in Sagittarius. It's still in Sagittarius, and the moon is in a sign ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is, of course, your ruler, and Jupiter is in Cancer. And in fact, if you think about it, the moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception. I should have pointed that out. I'm just not used to Jupiter being in Cancer, because if you look at it, Jupiter is in the sign of the moon, and moon is in the sign of Jupiter. So that actually does look rather good. It actually can be a really good day for you. And so therefore you should make a special effort to make the most of everything. And if you're going into work, if you have a job, if you're looking for a job, things can work out. You can make progress, and I do think, Pisces, you can make a really good impression. And just don't forget your charisma and attractiveness. You may feel that no one's interested in what you have to say, but you'd be wrong. You know how to say it. Remember, you're a Pisces. You've got, Mercury is still conjunct Jupiter. Mercury is only 3 degrees away from Jupiter. Mercury and Jupiter are in Cancer, in a Pisces-friendly sign. So Pisces, don't be afraid of telling people what you feel, and telling people what you want. You might not believe they're going to listen to you, but you would be surprised, because you have a chance to stand out. And maybe one reason you can stand out is because perhaps your rivals, other people, seem rather uninspiring, but you are the inspiring one. You're the one that's really has got something to communicate. So really, Pisces, it does look like being a good day, and it's also a day when, if need be, you can assert a considerable amount of power. So if you feel that something isn't going your way, that you're being blocked, don't worry about it. If you just give it everything you've got, I think in most cases you will get your way. So overall, Pisces, looks like being a great day. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at things from a viewpoint of the I Ching. So, I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 55, abundance. Now, this hexagram doesn't move. No moving lines. And perhaps that accords with the astrology. I have said that astrologically, not much happening today. Hardly any aspects. That's why this video is going to be shorter than my Monday video, where I kind of went on and on because there was so much to talk about. This time around, there isn't so much to talk about. And so when you've got a hexagram with no moving lines, that suggests that it might not actually be going anywhere. But, abundance, it is a good hexagram. It is as it sounds. Everything is working out. It is the peak of something. And it kind of fits in with the fact that we're moving on to the full moon. The full moon is the peak of the lunar cycle. Everything is coming together. And the question is, what happens then? So in the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching, we get the words, be not sad, be like the sun at midday. And other translations have a similar image. And so there is the question of, what does that mean? Why is it talking about sadness? And the Wilhelm commentary is suggesting, well, it's the peak of something. The sun doesn't get any higher than it does at midday. Enjoy it. Although it can be a bit intolerable at midday, can't it? Here in Washington State, it's been really hot. Yesterday was super hot, at least by my modest standards. And so that's it. And after midday, the sun is going down, of course, because of summertime. I'm not a fan of summertime, by the way. I mean of daylight saving time. I absolutely do not. I don't believe in it. I think we should just go by the sun, and you should have the sun at midday. That should be where the sun is at its peak, not at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, because you have to put the clocks forward. At least I'm talking from a northern hemisphere view. And so something is past its peak, or is about to be past its peak, and then the sun moves down, and then it sets in the evening. And so there might be a sense in which it's not going to get any better. This is it, and just accept it. That is one view. There is an alternative view that says that, in terms of be not sad, don't be sad because of what has what has happened in the past, and it could be about a change of regime, not necessarily a political regime, but there has been a change. You've transitioned from one thing to another. Now you are in this new world, this new regime, and you might be sad about the past. The past was great. You enjoyed the past, but it's gone. And so that is an alternative view. It's not necessarily that we have to just be preparing for decline, inevitable decline. But that's always the case, isn't it? Those moments, those fleeting moments when we know that it's not going to get any better, and we know that after that, it's just on decline, and we know we can try our hardest to reach that point again, but it just doesn't happen. And so do enjoy it. Do live in the present. That's one way of looking at this this hexagram, and don't think too much about tomorrow. Now there is a nuclear hexagram here, and I like to look at the nuclear hexagram when this hexagram is locked. And so the nuclear hexagram is just when you knock off the top and bottom lines, and you then make you make the third, fourth, and fifth the top trigram, and you make the second, third, and fourth the bottom trigram. So the nuclear hexagram is preponderance of the great, and so with preponderance of the great as a nuclear hexagram of 55, this is not the hexagram itself, but it's just the underlying picture, and it is perhaps telling us that something has got to be too great, too much of a burden, and sometimes enjoyment can become too much of a burden. Abundance, we have everything, preponderance of the great, but in the end we have to let go of it, and something has just got too much to carry. Even if we're enjoying ourselves, even if everything is great, it's still too much to carry, and in the end, we have to let go. And so that might sort of reinforce the point that be not sad, be like the sun at midday. That sun at midday has got a lot of responsibility, and so from the sun's perspective, it could be a relief when it starts to set, when there is a decline. Of course, it's not a permanent decline, because of course the sun will rise eventually the next day, but we shouldn't take the view that everything lasts forever. And now I want to look at Greta. And Greta has been in the news, and Greta, she was on a boat which was aiming to go to Gaza with supplies, and they got nervous off the coast of Greece because they thought they were being observed by a drone, and I think they were being observed by a drone, but I think it turned out to be a drone from a Greek coast guard. And then they went towards Gaza, and then the Israelis intercepted the boat, and she's now in Israel, and they're going to deport her, and that's it. And of course, this was a cause that Greta has got very, very involved in. And here is there was a statement by the Israelis regarding her, and it said it was the spokesman said, on the subject of aid, the yacht had a meagre cargo, but of course it will be sent into Gaza. To poor Greta, we say, who is really feeding Gaza and who is feeding their own ego? When it comes to this flotilla, it wasn't a flotilla, it was a selfie yacht. It was Instagram activism. Now, you could argue that Greta's a Capricorn. Here's her chart. So Greta being a Capricorn, well, she should take things very literally, shouldn't she? Carrying some goods to Gaza, and the Israelis are helping them out. They take the goods, whatever they're taking, and they're transporting it to Gaza. So they're helping in a transportation process. So if she was a real Capricorn, maybe she should just recognize this. Or perhaps the journey was not about really giving aid. It was about publicizing the thing. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. That is, just what she did. So, here is Greta's chart, and I've looked at Greta's horoscope, several times before. Still no time of birth for Greta. I looked on Astro.com. No, don't know when she's born, which is disappointing. We know we have a date when she's born. She's born January the 3rd, 2003, and she has got a load of stuff in Capricorn, 3 planets in Capricorn. She was born just after a Capricorn new moon, and so that says a lot about her chart. And Capricorn, there is something gritty about Capricorn. He's sort of no frills, and there is something quite puritanical about Capricorn, and maybe that was what she was reflecting when she was involved in sort of climate activism. We had to live simpler lives, and also Capricorn, let's be obvious about it. If the world is collapsing, if because of climate change and other reasons, life is going to become intolerable for a new generation, the younger generation. Well, obviously, you should do something about it. What's the point in going to school? So you could say that is a Capricorn response. By the way, I must emphasize, I'm not, in this part of this video, I'm not giving any opinion about the environment and climate change, even though I do have my own opinions. I'm not proffering those opinions. And she, with this new moon, it's she's if you look at things from a sort of Dane Rudger perspective. So Dane Rudger wrote this book on the lunation cycle, a famous book, The Lunation Cycle. It's a long time since I've read it, and he was almost suggesting that it says something about karma, not karma, but the cycle of lives. I don't think he necessarily said that, but that's the implication I took from it. And you look at the lunation cycle to see where someone is. And so if someone is a new moon type of person, then you could say that their life is very much, it's fresh. She's coming into the world, and there's lots of exciting things out there. And she wants to explore them all, and she wants to get involved in this, she wants to get involved in that. It's all new for her. Now, it's not the same as saying she is a new soul. It's more seeing reincarnation. If you're into reincarnation, you see it as a spiral. It's like a huge video game. Perhaps you have a cycle of lives at one level, and you go through the lunar cycle, then you move up to the next level, and you start again at the new moon. So it's all novel for her, and as she moves into a new set of lives. And when you're talking about Greta, I get the impression that she is quite keyed into what's going on in the collective. She's very influenced by, to put it crudely, what is fashionable at a particular time. And from a collective viewpoint, you might want to look at the sort of outer planets. And so she was born with Uranus and Neptune in Aquarius. So at the beginning of the century, you had those 2 planets quite close together in Aquarius, and she has Saturn. She has Saturn making a sesquiquadrate to Neptune. Now, maybe that Saturn sesquiquadrate Neptune says an enormous amount about her climate activism. And again, it's not what you think about whether she's right or wrong. It's not whether you think that whether you think that her actions were appropriate. It's rather what she was feeling at the time. And so if you've got Saturn semi-square Neptune, you could say that Saturn sesquiquadrate Neptune, 135 degrees apart. Here is someone who is genuinely afraid. When she was standing out or sitting outside, bunking off school, and was she sitting outside the Swedish Parliament? Is that right? Something like that. It was probably very real and very sincere. Saturn sesquiquadrate Neptune. There is a sudden fear that one has that the actions of man could make life intolerable for a new generation of children, as she was then, like her. Again, must make it clear that I am not giving any views. I'm not giving any opinions here. And so that may be how that Saturn sesquiquadrate Neptune is manifesting. And we should, I really do think we should look at the outer planets. I do think that they matter for her, and I think you can see the fear. And additionally, she may have been aware of some greater tragedy unfolding, and she does have Pluto conjunct the South Node. Now, Pluto conjunct the South Node, you can see, is it's a very wide conjunction between Pluto and the South Node. 10 degrees. So a whole generation of people are going to have Pluto conjunct the South Node. But Reinhold Ebertin, when he talks about the Pluto South Node connection, he describes it as something like the tragic destiny of a large group of people, something like that. Let me just tell you exactly what he says. Pluto and where's it gone? Pluto and the South Node. He says a common and tragic destiny shared with other persons, and I think that that's what she was kind of manifesting with what she was talking about with the impact of climate change. Now, why is that personal to her? Well, the reason it's personal to her is because of her Mercury. Her Mercury is at 28-25 Capricorn, so her Mercury is making a semi-square to her Pluto South Node midpoint. So that concept of the tragic destiny of other people is being picked up personally for her with her Mercury at in late Capricorn. And Greta has a Venus-Mars conjunction, and Venus-Mars conjunctions, they can be charismatic. Now, there are clearly people who don't find her charismatic at all, and she perhaps has lost the novelty now that she's no longer a child. She is 20. How old is she now? She's 22 now. So but when she was a child, she had that novelty, and that Venus-Mars conjunction can be charismatic to certain types of people, but other people find her not remotely charismatic at all. But that is the nature of a Venus-Mars conjunction. Venus and Mars is, as they might say in the UK, is a Marmite aspect. You either like it or you don't like it. Marmite being some vegetable spread. I think it's called something else in Australia, and you either like it or you don't, and that's actually part of the advertising, and that is Venus and Mars. That's the Venus-Mars conjunction in Scorpio. But she's got Mars in Scorpio. It is a strong Mars in Scorpio. It's a pretty problematic Venus in Scorpio, though. Sort of her Venus is kind of undermined by her Mars, and so people might not always find her to be great, but she's charismatic enough, and so that would sort of link with what's happening in her campaign regarding Gaza. And I suppose you could say that in terms of his outer planets, and with that Saturn sesquiquadrate Neptune, and also the fact that her Mars is actually on her Jupiter Uranus. She's kind of got a very, very wide Jupiter Uranus opposition, and very wide, 10 degrees apart. But Mars is 5 degrees from the square of Jupiter. Mars is 5 degrees from the square of Uranus, and so Mars is on that Jupiter-Uranus midpoint. So that Mars is really working well. And Jupiter-Uranus is about freedom. I think it can be about protest. We don't like the way things are, so we're going to do something, and we're going to do what we want. We don't care what people say. We're going to protest against the climate. We don't care about the Israelis. We're going to take some aid to Gaza, even though they were getting a bit nervous when they saw that Coast Guard drone. And also with the outer planet stuff, you perhaps have to be aware of, changing trends. Unfortunately, I am of a view, as I've said before, that I do not think that the environment over the next decade is going to be something that people are too bothered about. I mean, I think obviously the scientists and the people in the know are going to be bothered, but I think ordinary people are going to be thinking about something else. They won't be thinking about climate change. I mean, I think that when Neptune goes into Taurus in the 2030s, was it 2038, something like that, then people will be really concerned about the environment again. But for the moment, and so maybe she's picking up on it, that's not what people are concerned about, and that she's going to be she's going to sort of focus on something else, and she's going to focus on Palestine for the moment. I think she did go to Kiev to visit Zelensky, so she started to get onto that bandwagon. But then I think with the bandwagon of popular social support, after October the 7th, 2023, I mean, that was a big blow for Ukraine, wasn't it? When suddenly all these young people who had been very enthusiastic about Ukraine's struggle, they decided that what was going on in Gaza was far more important. And when you've got Greta's chart, and you've got a chart that we don't have a time of birth. What do we do when we don't have a time of birth? I do find it annoying. I mean, we should have a time of birth for Greta. It's like with the Pope. I mean, it just feels wrong that we don't have a Pope. We don't have a time of birth for Pope Leo XIV. We don't have a time of birth for Greta. Are we ever going to get a time of birth? So, what do we do? Well, one thing we can do is we can look at the new moon before Greta was born. She was born just before a new moon. So maybe that's going to give us some added information, especially if we take the view that Greta is a very collective kind of person. She is a mirror for what is going on in society, what a group of people are concerned about, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And so maybe that new moon matters. There's a new moon set for Stockholm, where she was born. North Node is on the midheaven. This is someone potentially who is there to get attention, to be out there in the public eye. She's got her Venus-Mars conjunctions in the third house. That is about communication. So that matters to her. Oh, and Chiron is conjunct the Sun. Oh, now Chiron is conjunct her Sun in her natal chart, by the way. That's something I didn't talk about. I think that probably matters, that Greta has a Sun-Chiron conjunction. And you might say that Sun-Chiron conjunction is about her desire to be different. She's not going to just follow the crowd. If you say, well, she is a maverick, and certainly she was a maverick. She decided she's not going to go to school, and she's going to protest against what's happening to the environment and to the climate. And there is also Chiron, the wounded healer. There is her own wound, and there's her psychological issues, which I don't want to go into, but that could be the wound, and she may be an example of Chiron being the Chiron the Maverick and Chiron the Wounded Healer, they're all part of the same thing. Perhaps the Maverick has to start off as being the wounded healer, to have that wound that she's had through her life, and some of the psychological challenges that she's had, and it turns into it turns into her as the Maverick. Now, if you've got a lunation before birth, you might want to relocate that. So, that new moon on January the 2nd, 2003, what did it look like if we were to, say, relocate the chart to, say, Gaza? So if we relocate the chart to Gaza, the Saturn is actually on the midheaven. So in this case, you can perhaps see why that's Saturn on the midheaven line, why she's drawn to Gaza, or indeed where she hits an obstacle. So the new moon Saturn on the midheaven line is through Gaza. Let me just let's do an astro map for that. It's for the new moon. It's not Greta's chart itself, because I don't have a time of birth for it. But let's just find Israel. Sorry, that's too much. There are too many lines there. Let me just. Let's have a basic map. Okay, there it is. So there is that Saturn on the midheaven line going. Well, actually, it goes through Jordan, but it's close enough to Gaza. So that may say something about her being drawn to it all. And so, what about what's going on in Greta's life? Why is she there? What's she doing? So, I've got an approximate time for when her boat was stopped. It will be further west. I've set this at Gaza, but in fact, it happened. I think it happened in international waters. So, as far as what Greta is experiencing at the moment with her transits, so Mars is really interesting. So when the boat was stopped, Mars was at 25 degrees 21 minutes Leo, and so Greta has a Venus-Uranus square in her horoscope, and that Venus in Scorpio. Well, it's not a projected planet. It's hers. It belongs to her. She's female, so she's not going to project it. It's square Uranus. That may say something about how she presents herself. And Mars is opposition her Uranus. Mars is square her Venus. So it's kind of not surprising that she's attracted to this kind of thing. And having Mars opposition your Uranus, having your boat stopped, and then eventually she'll be deported from Israel. So that Mars transit does seem to work quite well. Additionally, Uranus is at 28. Uranus is at 28:34 Taurus. So at the time when the boat was stopped, and she has Mercury at 28:25 Capricorn. What we don't know for sure because we don't have a time of birth. So Uranus is trine her Mercury. So this is a time where Greta has got a lot to say for herself. She perhaps is able to make herself relevant, giving speeches, making videos, and so she's now in the news again. And so Uranus trine Mercury is I think helping her out. And then there is there's the issue of what's she going through in a more generic sense. So Greta has her Saturn at 24 Gemini. So sort of last year, Saturn was, as it went through late Pisces, she had Saturn square Saturn. That is a generic transit that happens when you're in your very early 20s. It can actually be a very stressful transit, that Saturn square Saturn, when you're 21, 22, it can often, some people can coincide with the time when they leave university or when they realize they're no longer a child, and then they realize, what are they going to do now? And so it can be stressful. And for Greta, she's no longer a child. She's an adult. She doesn't have the advantages of being a child in terms of getting a publicity. So that was the stress. And it hasn't quite finished, because Saturn does go retrograde quite soon, and then I think it goes retrograde as far as 25 Pisces. So she will get Saturn square Saturn again later in the year, and so it may be that with Palestine and with this flotilla and her trying to make it to Gaza, she's again trying to make herself relevant, and it probably relates to this Saturn square Saturn. And finally, I just want to look at her solar arc directions. Again, I mean, one wonders, how useful it is, because I don't have a time of birth. We can't solar arc direct the midheaven. So there are actually some quite important solar arc directions coming up at the moment for her. She has there's her solar arc directed Pluto. Remember, this is where you move all the planets around 22 degrees, because she's about 23. How old is she? She's 20. She's 22. So you move the planets around 22 degrees. So Pluto is moving towards a conjunction of her Sun, and that could be quite important, and it could be quite dramatic. And she, again, perhaps feeling a sense of what is her purpose, but also perhaps concerned that she's not being listened to, and how part of her wants to hide, but part of her wants to be open and to be able to assert her power. And so how is she going to relate to that? Maybe you've got some ideas about that Pluto conjunct her Sun. Additionally, Venus is conjunct her Pluto. So her solar arc directed Venus has now moved on to her Pluto. This may say something about relationships, and could be her relationship with the public, but it's her Pluto is very much emphasized, and she's and she's got Pluto in Sagittarius. Pluto likes to travel, maybe. I mean, she can't travel by plane, I assume. I don't know how they're deporting her, because she doesn't like to travel by plane, because, of course, I would agree with her here that traveling by plane is just simply terrible for the environment. People shouldn't travel by plane. So she's got that. And additionally, her solar arc directed Mercury is at 21 degrees Aquarius. So her solar arc directed Mercury is exactly square her Mars. And this really is a time when Greta is going to want to communicate, and communicate in quite an angry way. There was a video of her a few days ago giving this what seemed to be quite a tearful speech about the struggles of people in Gaza, and how important this mission was. But we shouldn't forget that the Israelis have said that whatever was meager supplies are on board her boat, they will be transferred to Gaza. So you could say, well, maybe the Israelis are helping her out. They're helping her complete her mission. But probably Greta doesn't see it like that. So anyway, that's all I've got to say about Greta. I don't know if I've really had anything particularly useful to say, but she's in the news, and it is a problematic horoscope because we don't have a time of birth for her. So thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.